Come on.
There we go.
Okay, we are live. This is the weekly live stream for May 28th, 2025. I'm Greg Siskind. I'm joined by Elissa Taub this week. And we have a lot of news that we're going to be talking about. Not all bad. There were some bad. Well, let's face it, there's some really bad, but there's also some pretty good things that happened this week. Well, before we do that, I just want to take that off so people can see our names at least. So Elissa, first off, congratulations on your son Ari graduating high school. That's a big moment for a family. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. We just picked our dorm room today and everything went as planned. So there's a lot of relief in our household. That was more stressful than anything.
There you go. Yeah, I was at a graduation as well for my daughter, who is not going to be an immigration lawyer. She graduated law school and she's going into copyrights and trademarks. And it's like, what did I do to turn you off to immigration law? But she's actually really wanted to do that area for a long time. She was a public relations major in college, and it's kind of like a natural road for somebody with that kind of background. Nevertheless, it was still exciting to see her graduate. And so we had some nice occasions for our family in the last couple of days. Anyway, but we do, so we're back and kind of immersed in the craziness where there's something massive happening at least 2 or 3 times a day. It feels like with immigration law. So I have this list that I compile as the week's going on, and Elissa kept reminding me, what about this? What about this? Oh my God, that's like a pretty major thing. And some of these things happened like last Friday, so they feel like they're ancient history, but you realize that they were still within the last week. So we got to cover them tonight. But let's go back. I'm looking back, Elissa, on our list. First thing that I had on the list was this crazy announcement about F's and J's being suspended until the State Department can figure out some way to comb social media. And I will have to thank you. I will have to say they seem to be pretty good at vetting at covering social media after they basically were capable of suddenly revoking visas for a lot of students. I know they use AI to basically crawl social media accounts. You have to give your social media handles when you apply for visas. So I feel like that's kind of a nonsense excuse for what they really wanted to do is just stop F's and J's, and it's sort of more of this war on universities and a war on students. It seems like it's sort of I don't know who they're more angry at, the schools or the students.
Yeah.
But Elissa, why don't you? I know you serve on an AILA committee that deals with these issues a lot, and I know that you're sort of paying a lot of attention to what these announcements actually mean. So tell us a little bit about what this means for the F1 category. I guess the M1 category too, even though I don't know. I've never met anybody that's, I don't think I've ever handled an M1 case, J1s.
Yeah. So I think it was yesterday, there was a Politico report that came out that said that the U.S. State Department was pausing new visa appointments for anybody applying for visas in the F, M, or J categories. We also met, and it was all done by a cable that went from Secretary Rubio out to the U.S. consular posts all over the world. We managed to also see a copy of that cable that was obtained. And the bottom line is that the State Department said that they are pausing all new appointments for FM or J, and it's all categories of Js. It is not just J students. The cable says exchange visitors in the J1 category or something to that effect. It does not pick and choose amongst J1 categories. For those of you who are unfamiliar, F1s are for students who are coming to study in the United States. M1s are for vocational students, and J1s are used for a whole host of categories, from au pairs to summer workers, summer camp counselors, scholars, researchers, professors, medical doctors. Yeah, I was getting to that. Medical residents and fellows who all have to start programs on July 1. So huge amounts of people in very important programs, not just at universities.
Doctors, this is like doctors. This is the worst possible time to do that.
Yeah.
They're all getting their visas in the next couple of weeks to come here for their residency programs.
Yeah. So interestingly, so they said that the reason for this pause in new appointments is so that the State Department can provide further guidance to consular officers and consular posts on social media vetting of these visa applicants. As Greg mentioned, they already are vetting social media for these folks. My inkling is, and my information is something to the effect like they want consular officers to do a little bit more personal work on that vetting, or there's something additional rather than just using AI to do a quick search, that they want to do a little bit deeper dive on that social media vetting. It's unclear exactly what that's going to look like. The further guidance that state provided has not been made public yet, so we haven't seen it. My other supposition with all of this is that they want to slow down the issuance of these visas. So pausing the appointments and then coming up with some crazy, very lengthy administrative processing like social media vetting could cause a lot of people to come to the US late. It's really, really important to understand that this pause is not on visa issuance and it is not about travel. The pause is only for new appointments being scheduled in the F, M, or J categories. So if you already have a consular appointment scheduled for one of those visas and your appointment is confirmed, go to your appointment. I am hearing reports that people are receiving their visas or visas are being approved. I've heard a couple of folks say that report about administrative processing in those categories, but it's unclear if that administrative processing is related to this new guidance or whether that person would have been placed in administrative processing anyway. So that's not quite clear. But if you have an appointment, go to it. Don't assume it's been canceled and don't assume your visa is going to be denied. Go as planned because there's very good likelihood your visa will be issued and you can come to the US on time as you plan to. But if you are in the process of trying to schedule an appointment in those categories, the likelihood is that you're not going to be able to schedule until they lift this pause, and we don't know when that will be. This came up very abruptly, and there's been no intermediate guidance in the meantime. So we're just waiting to kind of hear what the next step is going to be. Also, I had a question from somebody earlier today about Canadians who are coming to the US in FM or J status. And my take on that is that they should largely be unaffected by this because
Right.
Canadian citizens don't have to go to a US embassy or consulate to apply for a visa. And Customs and Border Protection, CBP, has not issued any, follow-on guidance publicly about this. So travel to the
Don't give
United
me
States
ideas.
is okay. Yeah. So
Well,
they should be okay.
Elissa, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to predict that there will be an exception made for doctors within the week. And they
It could
did
be.
that. You may remember they did
Mhm.
that with the travel bans
Mhm.
last time Trump went crazy with these kinds of things with 212F orders. They did that with doctors because somebody realized it's like this is really bad for red state America. But with the doctors, so just a couple of data points to for people that are watching this. It is about a quarter of all the doctors that train in the United States in residency programs. About a quarter of them are in the U.S. on visas. It might even be higher than that, Elissa, but it's been traditionally for decades, it's been that number or higher. And within that, it is I don't even know what the number is, but it's probably like more than 90% now are on J1 visas that are coming in. It used to actually, at one point, it was half and half between Fs and Js, but
No, it's
H
it's
isn't.
over 80 for people coming for training, for doctors coming to the US to participate in a residency or fellowship, it's at least over 80% are coming on J1s.
Right. So now we're talking about almost a quarter of all the doctors training in the United States would normally be the first year residents would normally be coming into the U.S. in late June, and then they start their cycle for residents in hospitals around the country is July 1st to June 30th is a physician graduate year, a PGY. and they would normally be getting their visas very soon. Usually they don't have them like in May. They usually get them in like the month of June.
Now.
So this is the worst possible timing for this announcement by the State Department. And Lisa will probably smile when I say this, but somehow doctors get forgotten when they make these big pronouncements that the impact that, they used to do these things like on H-1Bs. You couldn't actually like be self-employed in the H-1B category. And then we had a meeting with USCIS and we said, there's a lot of states where it's illegal for a doctor to actually be employed by a non-doctor, and most of them are employed by themselves. So you now basically killed solo medical practices around the country on there. And then they made a really quick policy change on that. But we've seen this over and over again over the years where that category is completely ignored out of ignorance. Because people just don't know anything about the category and the timing and all of that. But this will have potentially major repercussions for the healthcare system in the United States. Just this one stupid little announcement that they made to vet social media may prevent a lot of doctors in hospitals everywhere in America from starting, and potentially being delayed by months, because that's what's going to happen with this.
And also, our tax dollars go to fund residency slots, right? Like Medicare dollars go to pay for residency slots. And so all of these doctors who come on J's to do residencies,
Elissa.
Patients don't get care appropriately, because this is how doctors learn to practice medicine, right? They're residents in hospitals and they learn the practice of medicine in that environment. And you're hamstringing not just the residency programs now, but then when those doctors are off cycle, they don't finish residency in time, or maybe they never come to the United States down the road, that exacerbates our very serious already existing physician shortage. So one thing kind of leads to another. This kind of policy, while in the meantime, somebody at state may be thinking, oh, we're really going to get them. This is hilarious. Ha, ha, ha. Everybody's freaking out. Someday when your grandmother goes to the hospital and they're waiting in the emergency room, waiting room for, 6, 7, 8 hours because there aren't enough beds or not enough doctors available. You probably could back up and find out that messing with the J1 visas, potentially cause a ripple effect that caused your grandma not to have a doctor in the hospital at that time. So it's a very practical, very serious issue. And the same thing for the F1 students, quite frankly. F1 students who are coming to the United States to participate in medical research and other really highly important STEM technical research, who are going to be delayed or prevented from coming here from doing those programs, has similar effects nationwide, right? I mean, it's just very short. It's short-sighted from an economic and just humanitarian perspective, but I think that's what we have come to expect.
It also has an impact. It may not seem as like a serious of an issue, but there are a lot of resorts in America that depend on those summer workers that come in the J1 category all over the place. And, a lot of them, hopefully a lot of them already got their visas because they're planning on being here in early June, but a lot of them might not. Summer camps all over America rely on the J1. We already heard from somebody today that was involved with the camp that's pretty worried about what this means as far as getting people here. So students are obviously bad enough, but it's Elissa, do we know if this is just initial student visa applications or any visa application?
Any visa. It's a total pause on
appointment. People that traveled, this is why we tell people it's like, don't travel on here right now. I mean, you can't, it's hard to tell people that because people need to travel. They want to see their families and all there. But this is why when they make these stupid sudden announcements and there's no, they don't give it, they could have, said basically, that it was going to do this over 30 or 60 days or wherever, but they just make this announcement without any warning.
Yeah. I mean, it's also why I tell people never leave. If you need to go for visa stamping, don't leave the United States without a confirmed appointment, right? It doesn't mean that appointment can't be canceled. But in this case, they're not letting folks schedule appointments. So if you were here and you went home and you're like, oh, I'll just schedule my appointment when I get there. In this case, that would have been a really bad decision. and there was no way that anybody could have known that it was going to happen right at this moment. Greg, can I just pivot to the two other visa announcements that happened today?
Yeah, well, one of them is specifically on F1. So
Yeah.
why don't you talk about that one first?
Yeah, so the first one, Secretary Rubio announced this afternoon, I think in a tweet initially, and then later in a more fulsome, well, a similarly short but more fulsome statement, that the United States is going to begin revoking visas for Chinese students. So basically, Chinese nationals and F1 student status. And the basis of the visa revocations are going to be those who are Chinese Communist Party members, which I think is probably a very large percentage of the Chinese students, since I know that may be compulsory. And then those that are studying in, quote, critical fields. Of course, the secretary comes out and they announce this very wide-ranging policy, but like there's no detail behind it as to what's a critical field. I assume it means most STEM fields. I think technology, AI, things like that are things that the U.S. government tends to be most concerned about with China, places where we are particularly in competition with them in technology. So I would expect that computer science, fields like that. But that's that's all the announcement said. I don't know, and I have not heard reports yet of anybody actually saying, "Oh my goodness, I was just notified my visa was revoked." For folks who are here in the United States, it's kind of a similar situation to what we saw with the earlier F1 revocations, where some people may get those notifications and immediately leave the United States because they're scared to stay. I think we would generally recommend not going anywhere until at least you've had an opportunity to speak with an immigration lawyer to find out what your options are. I think we also need more information about the basis for these revocations, like membership in the Chinese Communist Party alone. To my mind, isn't really a ground for revoking somebody's visa.
No, and it's been disclosed typically. I mean, it's been disclosed on the visa application, so it's not like people were hiding information. I want to say a couple of things, Elissa, about visa revocations. And you just mentioned one of those, which is the leaving the United States. So last time there was sort of this panic move where people immediately departed the United States once the CVIS revocations and the visa revocations started. And those people actually were in a much worse situation because you have a lot fewer rights in court to be able to fix the problem. If you're outside the United States, you are protected by a lot more rights while you're physically in the United States than while you're outside the United States. And in the lawsuit that we filed for Impact in Georgia on behalf of 350 students on there, we didn't let students that were outside the United States that had left the United States participate in the suit, because it was going to make it much more difficult for everybody else in the suit because they have fewer rights. And in terms of being able to get a judicial order, that was going to be a problem for the case. But that's in general, that's something that you should be super careful about leaving the United States if you think you're vulnerable to a visa revocation, even if it hasn't already happened yet. The other thing I'll mention is, it's a little bit of a tricky thing. Once a visa is revoked, what that actually means for your U.S. status, and so this, and this is partially a problem that with the government kind of, their position is changing, where, DHS in court said several times, basically, I think because they knew they were in a weak position, said that a visa revocation does not affect your status in the United States. Now, what we know is that there was coordination. So when a visa revocation happened, ICE would then act and terminate somebody in CVIS. And that's something that they swear up and down there's no connection between the two until they issued this memo that got submitted in court where they said, actually, that's what we're doing. And then they got into more trouble over that. But for now, I think what I would probably do if I'm, you're in this position, is wait and see what happens to CVIS. If the visa revocation for a Chinese student results in their CVIS being terminated, then you need to go to court. And the good news is There were probably at least 100 lawsuits around the country, including some very large suits on the last batch of people facing this. And I think it was like almost 100% win rate by the students. So keep that in mind before you go into panic mode. There will likely be, and I probably will be involved with it, but there will likely be mass suits out there as well, so that it's not necessary to have to come up with the money for an individual suit that might be a lot more expensive. Um, Hopefully we won't actually, this is just sort of a bluff and we're not going to see it, but you know, we've, it seems sometimes it is a bluff and sometimes it's not, and we're going to see.
Yeah.
Lisa, what was the other announcement?
Yeah. So there was another announcement this afternoon from Secretary Rubio again about another set of potential visa restrictions. So in this case, they're not just talking about revoking visas, but they're also talking about, I suppose, visa denials for people who fall into this category. But they're talking about visa restrictions on officials and countries who are seeking to censor the speech of Americans. And they specifically refer to, or he specifically refers to, countries that are trying to force social media companies to engage in content moderation. You can guess who may be lobbied for that visa restriction. I know that that X in particular has had major issues in China and Brazil in particular. He's had a huge spat with Brazil. And so, on the one hand, we all read this and we're like, man, like we just, put somebody in immigration jail for writing an op-ed. And yet now we're trying to tell people we're going to restrict visa issuance to
Just a
folks
little
who are trying
irony there.
to speech. Yeah. So it's a little bit, one thing that the announcement doesn't do is list any particular countries that are impacted. So we don't know specifically, like
I want to
officially.
show my chat GPT screen
Yeah,
on this.
we don't know officially who's covered, but we have some we have some assumptions.
Can I show everybody what who ChatGPT thought was covered? All right, hang on a second. Let me see if I can make this work. I think this is the first time I'm doing this on the live stream. Do we see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So so I basically pasted in the Rubio's little statement on here, and I just said, who is he talking about? And these are the countries. China, which is like already basically like, they were completely covered already, covered up today, and this was the big one that was being covered. But it is interesting, the Russia, who and it seems like all the countries that Trump emulates. Iran, which, all right, so Iran's I guess that one makes sense. Turkey, he's big friends with Erdogan. Saudi Arabia, he's big friends with the Sheikh. United Arab Emirates and India were the countries that were the countries that they thought about. So that is I thought that was a little amusing. That was the list that ChatGPT seemed to think were covered on there. A lot of these countries that seems like we're trying to imitate versus countries that really should be that should be scaring us as far as what they're doing. So that is so that happened today. We have no idea, I guess.
Yeah, there's no. Yes,
this is the mystery visa ban that we don't.
This is, in Trump 1.0, we would have these like tweets at 9:00 on a Monday. I remember very clearly during COVID, 9:00 on a Monday night, I'm hereby suspending the issuance of visas all over the, whatever it was. And everybody freaked out and there was literally no meat on the bones. And then it was left up to everybody behind the scenes to do that. And these kinds of announcements from Secretary Rubio are the same way. Oftentimes, I think that people actually doing the work at state to create these policies might not even know ahead of time what's coming. And then they've got to go behind the scenes and actually create the policies that he announces. So, so now they're stuck with that job. So, what exactly this means, who actually might be targeted by this free speech visa restriction thing, we just don't know. And I think that, and that's, obviously of concern. If your visa is revoked, the State Department is supposed to contact you, and they likely will contact you at the email address you used when you filed your DS-160. So here's a plug to make sure that when you fill out a DS-160, you're not using a throwaway email address. You're using a real one that you use regularly and check regularly, and that you don't use a work-related email address so that if you leave that job, you don't have access to that account anymore. You want to make sure that, if you're going to get an email telling you that your visa is revoked, that it actually comes to you. And the State Department has confirmed that when they send those notifications, they send it to the visa holder. They won't send it to your employer or your school. So you definitely want to make sure that you have, that you have access and periodically check or regularly check the email address connected to the last DS-160 that you file. That's really important because as these are really, vague policies that we can't really give specific guidance on, and they just came out today. As we go, you're going to need to potentially contact an immigration lawyer about if your visa was revoked, but you won't necessarily know if you don't get the email. So definitely stay in touch with your email.
All right, Elissa, actually, there are some more things with visas with students and also travel things. So it seems like ancient history already, but it is worth mentioning that the Harvard kerfuffle, I think, had been on Wednesday. Maybe it was Wednesday, Wednesday afternoon that it was announced. I think we mentioned something in our live stream last week about it, and I think we had predicted that it would not last very long. And so basically, Harvard, I think maybe it was Thursday, actually. So it happened on Thursday. Harvard went to court on Friday morning, and within 2 hours had a temporary restraining order, which, just to remind people, like in litigation, a temporary restraining order is when a judge makes a determination that there's some kind of emergency situation where they need, if something doesn't happen very soon, there could be substantial damage to the plaintiff. And the judge has to believe, and this is the critical part here, the judge has to believe that the person is very likely going to win. And it's a higher standard than a preliminary injunction, which is already a fairly high standard. Mm-hmm. Preliminary injunction usually takes longer, but it's basically the same idea where you're stopping something. Harvard got the TRO with that very high standard within 2 hours, which pretty much broadcast to the government that you are going to lose the entire case. And so I think that this is probably going to go away with Harvard on that particular issue. They already moved on and announced that they were taking all the federal funds away from Harvard, which at this point, Harvard was like,
whatever.
What else is left for you to do?
Right.
There, but Harvard is doing quite well in court. So kudos to the Harvard legal team for accomplishing that. And doing it that fast. It is not easy to when you get news in the afternoon to be in court the next morning with a fleshed out legal brief asking for something. So
let me just tell you, I have like all the respect in the world for those lawyers who work through the middle. I've done it. I mean, to work through the middle of the night so that you have something that's presentable and strong and persuasive. That's really impressive.
Yeah, I'm sure there were several lawyers on that team who did not go to sleep.
Yeah. I know it.
Thursday. So if you ever come across, I doubt any more watching this, but if anybody in the Harvard community is watching this, you should be super impressed by how well they did. All right, Elissa, there was one other thing that I know is in your wheelhouse, and that was the ESTA announcement regarding criminal stuff that's showing up. Yeah, can you explain that?
So interestingly, so there was a report yesterday.
It wasn't an announcement. It was a secretly asking new questions, right?
Well, it was, but then maybe not really. So here's a great tip. So an attorney got a report from one of their clients that it seemed like one of the questions in the ESTA application changed. And that rather than asking about specific types of arrests or convictions, it was just asking about any arrest or conviction. And then if it's had a warning and said, if you say yes to this, that you've ever been arrested or convicted of any crime, that your ability to continue with the application may be negatively affected. And that was a big change, right? And so we were very concerned that CBP surreptitiously was trying to change the requirements for ESTA to basically, prevent anybody who even had a mild arrest for something for which they weren't even convicted from being able to use it. Well, it turned out What it seems happened was the client had used a third-party ESTA application app, not applying directly through the ESTA website. And it turns out that the ESTA website has not been changed. So I think the learned lesson here, for our, for us advising folks, but I think for those of you who have, who are potentially going to apply for ESTA at some point to come to the US as a visitor without a visa, you don't need to go through a separate website and pay them some kind of silly fee to apply for ESTA. The government has its own website where you can file that application directly. And that is the best way to go, because these other third-party sites summarize questions, kind of manipulate the information in a way that it may not be accurate. And so it's just not worth doing that. It's worth going directly through the actual ESTA website.
So it was sort of a false flag. There wasn't really.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a false alarm. And look, given the way the administration's been acting, it wouldn't have surprised one person if they had tried to narrow who could use ESTA, right? They already stopped in Romania, that, was supposed to be getting ESTA, and they already kind of stopped that. So I think we're all primed for like bad news. But in that case, it wasn't. So nothing has changed.
All right. There was one good piece of news in all of this week, but the good news always seems to come from a judge. So aside from the Harvard good news, the other good news was the ombudsman's office for both the detention ombudsman and the CIS ombudsman, which keeps an eye on USCIS. Those offices were ordered closed by Kristi Noem and Elon Musk, and all of the, as far as all of the mess that was happening over the last few months. And that is the big watchdog, internal government watchdog, USCIS ombudsman, that basically they're designed to sort of protect the people paying money for applications and making sure that they're actually getting the service that's supposed to be delivered out of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. There's a service part in there. That agency got basically canceled after they had been around probably a good 25 years. And I'm hoping, so a judge ordered them basically to restore these agencies. Now, the problem obviously is a lot of these people who got terminated, hopefully they've been keeping an eye on this litigation, but obviously a lot of those people are probably already moved on and are in different jobs right now. But my hope is that that some of those people are going to be back at the ombudsman's office and doing their very important jobs. Especially now, they're needed like now more than we've ever. And also the detention ombudsman. That's a huge thing. That was sort of like, let's get the watchdog out of the way about detention. And that's when they, it was sort of not a coincidence. They got rid of that agency at the same time they started overcrowding a lot of domestic facilities for detaining immigrants. And then that's when they started making these deals overseas where there's nobody watching anything that's happening, in El Salvador, and now I guess South Sudan and Djibouti and wherever else they're sending them. So that was good news that there was a court victory there, and it hasn't really been widely reported. There also were some nice wins for free speech that came up with at least a couple of the cases for students who have people that have been put in detention over various issues. So one was the Dartmouth case. Am I remembering that one correctly? I always get the schools mixed up. And then we have Khalil in Louisiana. And then we it was not Cyrus's case. I get it mixed up on there. There's been several of these, several of them, but there had been, there was some good wins this week regarding procedural wins in these cases. Elissa, you were telling me about the Khalil case beforehand and what the judge say on that.
So the judge today found
remind people which case this is.
Yeah, so Mahmoud Khalil is the Columbia student who had a green card that they arrested and put in detention, and are trying to revoke his green card because of his involvement in protests at Columbia last year. And the judge in that case today, the federal court judge, so Khalil has asked for a preliminary injunction, saying that, so the basis for the government trying to get rid of his green card and remove him from the United States is on this whole like foreign policy provision, very broad interpretation of a very vague law that essentially allows the Secretary of State or the president to basically decide that anybody, any non-citizen shouldn't be allowed in the United States because of some foreign policy reason. The judge today found that Khalil was likely to prevail on the constitutional question about that law. And he's going to be, accepting other briefing, and he was going to issue another order about next steps. And that order may have come out this afternoon, and I may not have seen it yet. But that was definitely a positive. The other thing I wanted to mention, there was another case in this matter of a man who's just identified by his initials, OCG. This was a man that it was from Guatemala, and he was given withholding of removal from Guatemala. And then, but in the proceedings also claimed to be fearful of being returned to Mexico. He's a gay man and, definitely feared to be sent to either country. And apparently his case and the allegations were very strong. And then our government removed him to Mexico, and where he was afraid and where he wasn't really from, and where he still had a fear of persecution. So rather than stay in Mexico where he didn't have any connections, he went over the border into Guatemala, and he's been in hiding for quite some time now. Won't even see his own mother really, because he doesn't want to endanger her, and she doesn't want to endanger him by coming to see him. It's really a very tragic story. Today, the judge in that case ordered the government actually came to the judge today in a filing and said that they are trying to arrange for his return to the United States. So we'll see if that actually happens. But that was the facts there were really egregious and very sad. And so I hope that the government was being truthful in their filing today.
Okay. There was also some news on registration, and I posted a couple days ago internally on our attorney listserv. But this was a case in Louisiana, which is not sort of like where you would expect to see a verdict go against the administration. But a lot of you may have already participated in or are aware of this online registration requirement that basically employing a super old law that hadn't been used probably ever on there, and requiring people to register online. That was designed to kind of force people in the country legally to have to disclose their address to make it easier for the government to go and pick them up on there. So a lot of people are sort of grappling, with what to do. Anyway, the government began a criminal prosecution against 5 people in Louisiana, and a judge threw out those cases this week, saying that the statute requires knowledge, meaning that they have to actually know that they are supposed to register. The claim was made that, and the government has to prove that they knew that they were supposed to register. The burden's on the government, not on the accused. And the judge said they haven't met that burden, so he threw out the five prosecutions there. So that's the first case the cases I'm aware of involving the registration requirement that went into effect early last month. So that was an important win in the courts this week. I feel like I'm missing some, but that's that was a big one as well. So, Elissa, I think that may be the end of my list of questions. I don't know if we have.
One other thing I wanted to mention, and then I know we have at least one question in the comments, but if anybody else has questions, please feel free to comment. One other thing I just wanted to mention, over the last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, and if you're connected with me on LinkedIn, you may from time to time see me rant and complain about stuff like this. But over the last few weeks, we've really seen an uptick in very weird requests for evidence coming out of USCIS. I'm not sure if they're being written by AI and not fact checked, or what.
A lot of people think that's what's going on.
I mean, in some of mine, it really does seem like it because they're so wacky. I mean, just really weird stuff. Like not, and it goes further than some of the old copy paste errors that we would see where it just has the wrong field listed or the wrong occupation in the RFE or something like that, which shouldn't happen anyway. But okay, we all make mistakes like that. These are really deeply concerning RFEs where they're getting the law wrong, they're getting the facts of the case wrong. They're asking for evidence that either doesn't exist or isn't even in a relevant time frame. They're including dates in RFEs that just don't make any sense. I mean, just really weird stuff. And on some of my listservs with other immigration lawyers, I'm seeing other people report similar weird stuff. And so the only reason I'm bringing this up is so that folks out there, immigration lawyers who may be watching, misery loves company. We're all seeing, I think we're all seeing weird stuff. But if you're a client of someone's, right, if you're here on a visa and your immigration lawyer files something that is really routine or what we feel is really routine, and they tell you that they've gotten this weird RFE and they need to do some research or they need to, they're just really angry about it and it's bogus and ridiculous and they start to get really agitated. Please believe them. It's just, I can't tell you, probably for 20 minutes, it derailed my whole morning. I think this is yesterday. I think about 2 hours of my morning yesterday were derailed by an RFE that was so incredibly ridiculous that I had to read it multiple times, even to just make sure that I wasn't missing something.
This is about the guy who's being paid too much?
Yeah. USCIS is upset that my physician client is going to be paid more than they think he should be paid. And I'm like, maybe you should have gone to medical school and not be jealous of the fact that my client is very well compensated.
Let me remind people sort of like what the law is. The law says that you can't underpay immigrants because it has the effect of pushing down salaries for U.S. workers. So the idea is that the government publishes these wage surveys, and you have to show the person that you're sponsoring is paid over a certain amount. And it's designed to, there are people who think immigrants drive down wages for Americans. This is the law that's supposed to prevent that. And Elissa, in your case, you had somebody who's being paid twice as much.
Oh, no, like 3 times. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
He was a very, very valued person who was being paid way, way, way over what the government said was necessary to pay in this particular salary. So in this case, it would probably have the effect. It's like, like in the NFL and all these other places where one person gets a contract and they raise, they make much more money. Everybody makes more money after that.
Yeah. So, rising tide raises all boats. So they come to me and they're accusing in the RFE, they're basically saying that my client isn't complying with the prevailing wage requirement because they're paying him too much.
There's no maximum salary requirement.
And so I'm reading this, but then what was even better was in the RFE when they list, they give you like this laundry list of types of evidence that you could submit. My client just started working for this employer within the last couple weeks, and they're asking us for pay records from last year, from earlier this year, all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, what's that going to, we don't have any pay records from him for a year ago. You can see in the petition exactly where he's worked and what he's been doing. Like you had his employment agreement in front of you that said what his position is, what his rate of pay is, where he's going to work. You have all that information. So I had to let it simmer.
Elissa, how much did this petition cost the employer to file? Like what did they pay? How many thousands of dollars does the government get to adjudicate that petition?
Hold on a second. I have to do math. That takes me a little time. Probably, between everything, this petition probably cost somewhere around $8,000 to $9,000 to file.
Right. But so the government has thousands of dollars that
on the government fees, probably about $5,000.
$5,000 they're getting, and I've heard that they spend an average of 12 minutes on an H-1B petition. So there's like a lot of profit in there for the government. But You would think for $5,000, somebody would actually be like looking at all the evidence and the documentation and giving it a serious review, as opposed to, feeding it into ChatGPT and asking for it to. Well, actually, they don't use ChatGPT. They use
DH.
DHS Chat. That's the. I understand they have their own system that probably would explain why we're getting some of these crazy
Yeah.
things.
So anyway, I mean, this RFE is particularly egregious. I had to let it. I was really angry yesterday, and with one exception, I typically don't respond to RFEs when I'm angry. But in this case, I have to let it simmer a little bit because I do want my response to be measured, and I'm going to take some other actions as well. But it's just one example of an increasing stream of ridiculousness. So just be aware, we were kind of primed for this when the Trump administration came in, that we were going to have an uptick in the number of RFEs. But what I'm actually seeing isn't that so much as an uptick in the incidence of stupid RFEs, like weird ones that just don't make any sense on the law, on the facts, or anything else. So just know that that's happening, and we'll take all of the good mojo and good thoughts and prayers that you have.
All right. Well, we have we do have a couple of questions,
Mhm.
I think, or maybe just one on here, and then I can talk about a little side project I've been working on that, if you want, in a second. But why don't what's the first question we want to take, Elissa?
I think there's only a couple. I only see a couple of actual questions. But one is about naturalization requirements and whether there have been any changes to naturalization requirements.
No. That's
Mm-mm.
sort of a really, it's kind of a curious thing, that because they did it.
Let's not
They,
say anything.
well, there was a lot of action on naturalizations in the first Trump administration. Remember,
Mhm.
they redid the examination. Processing times got a lot longer. So far, it seems pretty normal,
Yeah.
on
Even
here.
the interviews, my clients' interviews are going pretty smoothly. They are starting to do things like they'll ask you every question in the application all over again in your interviews. So like they're trying to be like scarier about it, but my clients' cases are still getting approved, and we're still getting naturalization interviews very quickly, relative to other types of applications. So things seem to be okay, and I don't want to say more than that because I'm afraid I'm gonna
Don't
like,
ex-
yeah.
there is a comment I want to put on the screen. So this is Mrs. Firestone. Mrs. Firestone was one of my favorite teachers growing up, who I'm so pleased is watching this evening. And so thank you, Mrs. Firestone. I loved when I took your classes, and they meant a lot over the years. So it's nice to see that. And also Carl Schusterman
Mhm.
is a celebrity amongst immigration lawyers. He was an influence on a lot of us, and very long-standing expert in physician immigration, J1 immigration, nursing immigration, all that. So it's nice to see you, Carl.
Yeah. Hey, Carl.
Um, Anyway, so Elisa, I was going to mention this little project I'm working on, that has to do with the AI stuff, and
Mhm.
also I was pleased to hear that Elisa's other son is going to be interning with the AI company this summer. So I have a lot of projects in mind for him.
Mhm.
But we have been working on, we talked last week, and we will be talking definitely next week about Venezuela. On there, there's some stuff I want to talk about, but I can't because of something we're working on that we'll be hopefully announcing next week. But a lot of people who are in these categories, like the asylees and not the asylees, the Afghans and the Venezuelans and other groups, presumably soon, are having their TPS taken away, and a lot of those people are going to be applying for asylum. Asylum work is very time consuming for lawyers. And unfortunately, it's sometimes the groups that have the least amount of money to be able to afford services. So it's in beta right now, an asylum drafting tool. But what I have been working on for a couple of weeks is a series. I have 21 of them now, of these prompts that I've written, very complex prompts that are for lawyers that do a lot of supporting things in the asylum space, like a prompt for drafting a supporting expert declaration for particular social group claims. That was one. Identifying a viable particular social group based on client facts. Creating a country conditions report for an asylum or convention against torture claim. Anyway, there's 21 of these that I've come up with so far that I'm going to be adding in, but I'm also going to be making these prompts available for anybody that wants them for whatever tool they happen to be using, just because in asylum in particular, this is something where we need to get these tools into the hands of pro bono lawyers, into nonprofit lawyers. There's just a huge crisis that's probably going to be, well, it's already here, but it's going to be much, much worse over the next couple of months, where there's the need to file hundreds of thousands of asylum petitions. There's only 17,000 immigration lawyers in the country, and most of them are pretty busy right now. So I have no idea sort of how the bar is going to be able to handle it on their own. It's going to depend completely on lawyers that do other things taking on these cases. A lot of it's people are just going to have to file themselves, unfortunately. But these tech tools can hopefully be better than doing it without any of the support at all. So look for that over the next couple of days, where I'll probably start rolling out some of these prompts onto social media for anybody to use. My only warning is don't use it in a tool that you put confidential information in there, because that would be an ethics violation. But a lot of people have access to confidential tools, whether it's ours or whatever AI software they're using, including, I believe, Microsoft Copilot is a tool that that I believe works for. But don't check for yourself on that. But that's something a lot of people have with their Office 365 subscriptions. So you could potentially use it there. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing is, if you're an immigration lawyer and you're watching this and you haven't filled out the case management survey that I've distributed, I've tried to put it on every listserv I can think of. Yes, it's a little longer this year because we asked a bunch of AI questions in addition to case management system questions, but it's really critical. We put the survey out every year, and we just need probably about 50 more firms on here before I feel like we are close enough to having a number I'm comfortable with. So if you're watching this, just text me if you want the link for it. I posted it also in my feed, but I need immigration lawyers to fill out that survey form. So that's all I had to of my asks on there. Lisa, do we have anything else that we want to hit, or we can?
I think that covers all my notes. We covered all my notes.
All right. Well, I have an early morning flight tomorrow, so I will be happy to end a few minutes early. We will be back next Wednesday. Like I said, I will have some news, hopefully, for Venezuelans and Afghans next week. That I think if you're from one of those countries, you will want to tune in for that. And that's it. So we will see everybody in the next time. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye.